Hey, everybody. Thanks so much for joining us right here on The Right View, Ladies Tea. Tonight, we are joined by Daily Caller writer Brianna Lyman and Turning Point contributor. Please welcome to the show, Morgonn McMichael. Brianna and Morgonn, thank you, ladies, for joining us. There's a lot going on as it relates to Hunter Biden, not so much as it relates to Joe Biden. And I think it's very interesting because when you look at what's going on with Hunter now, and of course we saw that Hunter Biden last week finally was indicted on a couple of gun charges. Now it's interesting to me, Brianna, because these things are the only crimes being alleged against Hunter Biden that cannot be tied back to Joe Biden. Very convenient. And I'm sure they think that we'll all just say, oh, well, they got him now. Hunter Biden's dealt with. He's charged with very small crimes, really, in the grand scheme of things. One count of false statement in purchase of a firearm, one count of possession of a firearm by a person who is unlawful or addicted to controlled substances, which we know is Hunter Biden from his very own words in his book, one count of false statements related to info required to be kept by federal firearms dealer. Nothing to do, of course, with the Foreign Agents Registration Act, FARA. No, nothing about tax violations. Nothing that would implicate Joe Biden. What did you think of the Hunter indictment last week?
Like you said, I mean, these current charges insulate the president because no matter how dig you deep, you're not going to necessarily be able to tie Joe Biden to a gun charge. Whereas, like you mentioned, FARA and tax fraud could possibly implicate him. And I think this speaks to the larger point of whether or not there was a coordinated effort with the Biden administration to essentially withhold information from the American public. And the reason I say that is you think of the FBI whistleblower who came out recently and said that there was a judge in California and specifically Matthew Graves, who were Biden appointees that refused to cooperate with David Weiss to bring tax charges. And if you look at, for instance, Matthew Graves, this is a man who worked for the Biden campaign. He donated to the Biden campaign. Then Biden appoints him in November of 2021, and then he refuses to press charges on Hunter for tax evasion and tax purposes. And so the question is now, is David Weiss going to fall into that same pattern where he wants to bring more charges like we've read in CBS and ABC, and not be able to because of non-compliant attorneys who are appointed by the Biden administration?
It's just sort of amazing to me, Morgonn, because we all can look at this. We know how differently things would be covered if instead of the last name Biden, you put the last name Trump in there. Very obvious. Everyone understands that there's double standard here. Unfortunately for our country, you are supposed to have equal application of the law to all people, no matter what your last name, no matter if you have an R behind your last name or a D behind your last name. It is very convenient, all of this. I will say that I'm excited to hear that House Oversight Committee Chair James Comer is not done. He's not stopping. He is going to investigate further. And it sounds like he is going to try and pursue personal and business bank records for James and Hunter Biden. James Biden, of course, Joe Biden's brother. So far, James Comer, I feel like, has really done quite a nice job as to exposing a lot of stuff. He has shown us that the Bidens received millions from Russia, Ukraine, Kazakhstan during the Obama-Biden administration. So I wonder what is going to come out of kind of infiltrating the personal and business bank records of Hunter and James Biden. Any ideas as to what we might see there?
It's going to be really interesting. And I think we all know what we're going to find out in these bank records that are going to be released. I mean, if you take a look at even his father, President Joe Biden, has been aligning with Hunter and supporting his son throughout this. And of course, you know, we just saw your father-in-law has gone through numerous indictments. This is the first one from Hunter Biden. And it's about time that he was indicted for something. And even if it's just some firearms charges, you know, they need to keep pressing on it and looking into this family, because of course, you're absolutely right, Lara. If it was your last name, it would be treated completely differently, as we've seen over the past couple of years unfolding. So we really just need to keep the pressure on them to continue investigating the Biden family and continue to press on this administration, because we all know what's going on behind closed doors. We all know from the leaks, from honestly, if social media didn't exist, nobody would even know what was going on. So I'm just glad that finally there's some good news here.
Yeah, I mean, let's keep going on it. And I mean, at least we have a very slim, but still a majority in the House, because that's why we're able to at least get a little bit of information out there. Morgan, you're right. Could you imagine if we relied solely on the legacy mainstream media for our information? At one time, we were able to do that. At one time, there were actual journalists, people who would just report the fact. I know it's laughable. You have to laugh about it. Because at one time they would report the facts and they would make sure that, people had both sides of a story. Not anymore, not for a long time. And I think it really did take my father-in-law, Donald Trump, to expose a lot of what they were doing. He knew they were doing it because they did it to him. But a lot of people didn't realize how dishonest the media is. And by the way, how dangerous this could be for our country. If there really have been such nefarious things going on with the Biden family, as we suspect. For example, you just look at Ukraine in and of itself and what went on there with Joe Biden needing to go over and talk to make sure that the prosecutor was fired because they were investigating Burisma, where his son Hunter worked. There was apparently a bribe in the neighborhood of $5 million paid to get this done. Why would a vice president of the United States, who's supposed to be focused on our country and doing what's best for us, be over worrying about firing a prosecutor looking into an energy company in Ukraine? If that is indeed what happened, and it pretty clearly is what happened, that is problematic for our vice president, let alone the guy who now is president of the United States. So we need to get to the bottom of that. Speaking of journalists and what a sham it all is these days, journalism seems to be dead. The New York Times actually decided to be honest for once, which, I mean, I guess we'll give them a round of applause. Once in a blue moon, they come out with something halfway decent. There was an op-ed in the New York Times titled "The One Privilege Liberals Ignore," and they basically admitted that single-parent families are large drivers of things like childhood poverty, and that kids whose parents are married usually fare far better. You think this is kind of an obvious one, but it sounds like, Brianna, that the New York Times had a hard time admitting this, and a lot of liberals have a hard time admitting this, because I guess they're worried that they'll be labeled as racist if they point out the obvious. We know how much better off kids in two-parent homes are. Kids from single-parent homes are more likely to drop out of school early, are more likely to abuse drugs, are more likely to abuse alcohol, are more likely to live in poverty. So I think it's great that at least we got a little something positive out of the New York Times op-ed section. I'll take it. How about you?
Look, their reluctance to admit a problem that conservatives have been waving the flag for years is because they are in part to blame. And fatherlessness decimates Black communities more than decimates any other community.
Right.
And it does stem back. If you look from 1968 to now, and this is for all races, fatherlessness has increased about fourfold, which is that is a tremendous number. But if you look to the policies of the late 1950s, early 1960s, it was the man in the home policy. And it essentially prohibited couples who had a child from receiving government welfare programs or any kind of subsidies, even though the child otherwise would qualify, because there was a father in the home. So what you saw during this time period was fathers of all races, but in particular Black fathers, leaving the home so that their child and the mother of their child would be able to receive these benefits. And when it comes down to putting food on the table and having roof for their children's head, you can understand why that was a lucrative option. And so unfortunately, the government incentivized single motherhood. And later on, the Supreme Court in King versus Smith, they actually overturned these policies because of the problems it was causing. But it was a little too late, right? Because now we see with Lyndon B. Johnson and the Great Reset, right, those policies we saw in the late 1960s, it only encouraged single motherhood. It created a larger welfare system that was expanded upon FDR's. And this, of course, feeds into the 1970s with the crack epidemic, which the United States government is not innocent in. So they know that they are responsible in part for some of the issues that these communities are facing, and they don't want to admit it.
Yeah, I mean, it's just I think you're right. They don't want to admit it, but gosh, this is something, Morgan, we should be focused on. If you really want to talk about doing what's best for our future generations, which it seems like, unfortunately, the Democrats have just washed their hands of doing anything positive for our children. You look at schools and how our schools now seem to just be ultimately failing most kids in this country. Kids are so far behind because of all the nonsensical shutdowns during COVID. And then on top of that, they're coming back and trying to catch up. And the teachers are teaching all this woke nonsense instead of reading and writing and math, the things that can ultimately benefit them down the road. Look, I think that it's just so obvious. I look at my own two kids and the way that it's not only do you have a dual income if you have two parents in the home, you have the ability to earn more money and better your life in that way. But gosh, everybody knows, every mom out there knows that sometimes you need dad to come in to handle a situation. And every dad out there knows sometimes you need mom to come in to handle a situation. I just think that this is something, maybe now that the New York Times has finally talked about it, maybe we can focus on doing what is actually best for our kids, because this will be the future of this country. And quite frankly, I don't think anything is more important.
Absolutely. There is nothing more important than raising our next generation of children to love their country and to serve their families. I mean, the nuclear family wasn't just some concept pulled out of thin air. The nuclear family was a concept to actually raise our next generation, to be a fostering and healthy generation. And Brianna's 100% correct. When these liberal policies have directly impacted our next generation, I mean, almost 30% of American kids right now are living in a single parent home or with no parents at all, which is insane to me. And like conservatives, 91% of college conservatives know that a double parent households are going to 100% be better off. But a lot of the more liberal college students think, no, you know what? Actually, they can be single parent households. But a lot of those liberal students also were coming from single parent households. And it's really interesting when you look at morals and values base of just the psychology behind it of who actually believes in more conservative values, more than likely were raised by two parents, a mother and a father. There's a reason why we have the nuclear family. We need to care about this more. And look at the school boards and what they're pushing inside of the schools for our next generation. They're promoting, the LGBTQ propaganda. They're promoting, having one parent. And I don't think that there's some sort of coincidence there.
Yeah, I mean, unfortunately, I think you're right. Something else that I don't think is a coincidence that when you look all across the country, you look at cities run by Democrats and they're kind of in shambles, ladies. I mean, there's no doubt. You go to New York City, you go to Chicago, you go to places like Minneapolis, where recently this single mom, speaking of, Lucretia Anderson is her name. She had just moved to Minneapolis. I think she'd been there maybe 2 or 3 weeks from California, of all places, and really hadn't even unpacked and settled in when there was a deadly shooting just outside of her home. And so she's like, well, that's it. I'm done. She's now trying to get out of Minneapolis. She's now trying to look for a new home. We talked last week on this show about the fact that a prominent Democrat in Minneapolis who was very pro taking money away from the police and defunding the police a couple of years ago, was held up at gunpoint in her driveway with her 4- and 7-year-old kids in the car with her and then beaten in front of her kids. Obviously, we know Democrats are in charge of Minneapolis. You look just a little west of there, Seattle. This is, I mean, of all places, I don't really know what is going on when it comes to Seattle, Washington. This is horrifying because if you look at the statistics on, or first look at their drug policies, basically anything goes there. They did a recent study and there were 1,900 reports of drug use on the bus system, 52 transit operators who were exposed to drug smoke, and I'm going to guess it probably wasn't marijuana. They sampled 11 buses and 19 train cars. 100% of the air and 98% of the surfaces contaminated with meth. 46% of the surfaces had traces of fentanyl. Brianna, when people in the city were like, oh my God, this is crazy. What about if I want to take my kids on public transit of some variety? They were told, and I'm not even joking, a little meth and a little fentanyl won't kill you. What?
Tell that to the mother of the toddler in New York City who just died, I believe it was yesterday or
Oh
2 days
my
ago, at a daycare
God.
because of ingesting fentanyl, and 2 other children were sent to the hospital because they were sick. And so maybe they should go visit New York, where the crisis has become overwhelming. And we talk about drug policies in the United States, and it's a twofold issue. At a statewide level, you have states like New York who give out sterile needles. They have safe injection sites. And at face value, you say, okay, they want to make sure if someone overdoses. But what you do essentially is you coddle addicts who don't need coddling. They need either help or they need to be reprimanded for their actions when they're impacting their communities. And then at a federal level, when you have a porous border like we do, where fentanyl is coming across, you put Americans' lives at risk. And, yesterday was 4 months since my uncle passed away from an overdose. And I got to tell you, we are still waiting on an autopsy, but fentanyl looks like it was the culprit. And people forget it strikes real families, no matter what the political opinion is. And until someone steps up and steps in, you will continue to see this problem be exacerbated.
Oh my God. Well, first of all, I'm so sorry about your uncle. That is horrific. But by the way, Brianna, it just goes to show you, you're right. It is not selective in who it kills, fentanyl. This is something that is really affecting every single aspect of our country. I can't tell you the number of people that I know that have friends of friends or relatives. Everybody has a connection somehow, because all it takes is one time. It's not the old days back in the 70s where people would go out and you're like, yeah, I'm going to try a little something one time. No, because you're dead. That's it.
You can't risk it.
And why does it take 4 months for an autopsy? That's crazy.
That's what we want to know.
Oh my gosh. I'm so sorry. That is horrific. Morgan, I'll tell you, it's just the answer to all of this stuff is so obvious, I think, to so many people. We just talked about how we've incentivized single parent homes in this country based on government policies. We are now incentivizing, as we're just talking about, drug use. We're incentivizing people to come here illegally into this country right now. People know you can just flow right over the border. And we always hear from Eric Adams, the mayor of New York City, man, it's a big problem right now. We've got all these illegal immigrants coming here. Well, they did a whole federal program to say, well, you can apply for work now if you are an illegal immigrant, which is mind-boggling in and of itself. When you look at New York, you have tens of thousands of illegal immigrants who have actually made it to New York that we know of. And guess how many of them have actually tried to apply for work authorization? Morgan, 800. That's it. What are these other people doing? Why is this happening? And how stupid do we have to get before people are like, oh, this was the wrong way to do it? I don't understand.
They're jeopardizing the American people. It's not that hard to close the border. We have the funds to close the border. We have the funds to send more Border Patrol agents down there to actually protect our homeland. But instead, these liberal policies and these progressive cities are exploding already with crime. They have already homelessness problems. It's a humanitarian crisis right now in pretty much every progressive city. Look at Philadelphia. Look at San Francisco. Look at New York. Just a few, Chicago. And now they're flooding them with even more illegal immigrants. These immigrants also that are coming, there was a video that surfaced on Twitter the other day where there was no women and children in sight. Majority of the immigrants coming in are young men that are of military age, not women and children, not unaccompanied minors, not single families, but just men seeking here. And then, of course, the liberals love to use the excuse they're coming here because they believe in the American dream. And in that press conference, they also were saying that they were here for the American dream. Great. I love the American dream just as much as anybody else. Half of my family are immigrants from the Philippines who came to the United States legally, and it took years to immigrate here. So illegal immigration is no joke, and now it's costing the American people. Our taxpayers are directly funding for their phones, directly funding their housing, directly funding the drug use as well because of the free needle programs, which a lot of immigrants are taking advantage of the drug usage in these cities because they can't find work. And so it's just continuously creating this problem.
Oh, it is. It's so insane. I was over the weekend back home, Wilmington, North Carolina, with my family, and I got to hang out a little bit with my cousin Victoria and her husband Phil. Phil is from Canada and has been working for, I'm going to say 5 or 6 years now to become a legal immigrant of this country, to get a green card. And my cousin was telling me all of the things that he has had to go through, all the money he has had to pay for immigration attorneys. He had to give blood samples, and yet the people at the border can just walk on in. And you're right. It is absolutely infuriating, and it's taxing and overtaxing every system in our country. We cannot sustain it. We've got to get somebody in the White House who understands that we have to follow the laws on the books and close the border. It's crazy. Speaking of rules, people like to break rules. People like to do their own thing. Sometimes you need a bit of decorum, I would say, when you're in a certain setting. If you're, for example, a senator, a congressman, and you are there in the Capitol and you're doing really impressive things, you're voting on major bills and all this, I would say it's appropriate to dress a certain way. There used to be a rule, ladies, that you had to at least have some sort of business attire on. I think a year or two ago, maybe they voted that women can finally go with, no sleeves. You could kind of wear, a sleeveless top. But other than that, you need to conduct yourself a certain way. You need to dress a certain way. No more. And I think we can give credit to the senator, shocking to say, from Pennsylvania, John Fetterman. We know he loves his hoodies. We know he loves his sort of like basketball athletic shorts, although it doesn't ever appear he's actually ever utilized them for any sort of physical activity. Chuck Schumer, Senate Majority Leader, just kind of quietly ditched the dress code requirement that was necessary to go there into the Capitol building and perform the tasks of the Senate and the House. And I don't know, Brianna, it just seems like, is everything degrading in our country, including the attire required by some of the most important people in our country, at least as it relates to the federal government?
Yeah, and I think it's embarrassing. I'm sure Fetterman was excited to be able to now comfortably wear his attire to the Senate building without having to worry. But I think it speaks to the low expectations that Democrats have for John Fetterman and the long list of low expectations we have for him in particular. And you talk about degrading, first impressions and every impression thereafter does matter. And the United States Congress is a very serious institution. It's our most important institution we have right now. And to be able to say to a senator that you don't have to represent not only yourself, but you are representing your constituents, have respect for those who elected you and give them what they deserve, which is someone that, again, shows up, has respect for their constituents, and votes however they see fit.
I mean, it's just, I feel like, people don't even try anymore, Morgan.
No.
I was on an airplane earlier today, and just every time I go into an airport or on an airplane, I'm like, wow. Like, I mean, it's really eye-opening. I'm there with my kids, but people, it's like they can barely get dressed. The flight's at 10 o'clock in the morning. I don't know what people have going on. They can't tear themselves out of bed 20 minutes early to brush their teeth and take a shower. It doesn't seem like that big of an ask. But this sort of thing, I just look at it, and maybe it's not that big of a deal in the grand scheme of things, but these people are representations of their constituents, right? And they also are representations of our country. And just like the president of the United States right now, Joe Biden, who is embarrassing everywhere he goes, who looks weak and like he really doesn't understand what is going on. Don't think that the rest of the world hasn't noticed that too. And don't think the rest of the world isn't going to take a look at our congressional members now that we've just done away with any sort of, decorum whatsoever there at the Capitol. And they're going to say, what a joke the United States is becoming. It's so sad to me that I continue to feel like we're just kind of like straight down the hill. I don't know. We're going to crash at some point, I guess.
Absolutely. I mean, it's just disrespectful to themselves, too, because when, you go out in society and you wear what you want to wear, it's also just respecting yourself and others. And you're absolutely right. These are elected members in our Congress, they should be putting on the persona and an image that is respectful to themselves and everybody else around them. And 100%, we're going to see people internationally looking at people like John Fetterman, and they're just a national embarrassment. And for one, I do not care if your sweatsuit costs $10,000 or it's $10 from Goodwill. It's still a sweatsuit. It doesn't take a fashion expert to tell you that a sweatsuit isn't appropriate to wear on the Senate floor. I don't want to see women showing up in yoga pants just as much as I don't want to see men showing up in running shorts and a hoodie. It just doesn't make sense. It's not the appropriate attire. And we're not some hipster, local Southern California startup company.
Yeah, it is about self-respect. Have a little self-respect. And you know what? I would argue that if John Fetterman wants to come into the Capitol building wearing athletic attire, let's get him a workout in before he gets there, because I actually think it could be very positive for him. I know he's had a lot of health issues.
I need it.
I mean, I think it can help him. And just being honest, God bless him. I hope he's okay. It doesn't seem like anyone these days running for the Democrat side is. Nancy Pelosi, 83. She's running for a 20th term in Congress. My God, what are we doing? 2024 can't come soon enough. It's so insane. Something else that's insane is that everything is racist, as we know. Of course, now nothing is racist because everything is racist. This was one that I thought was just really dumb as standard. Harvard, of course, full woke. They can't help themselves over there. They had a student newspaper claim that a new admissions test is racist. There's a 200-word limit on this admissions test, like the essay that you have to write. You get to write several essays, 200 words apiece, which, by the way, when I was applying to college, where were the 200-word limits? Please give me that. God, that sounds amazing. But they claim at this Harvard student newspaper that the 200-word limit does not give applicants from non-traditional backgrounds enough space to explain themselves and their stories, Brianna. To me, if it's 200 words for me, it's 200 words for the next person and the next guy and the next one. Why on earth would somebody want more words? And can we just stop calling everything racist, please? That would be nice.
Yeah, I think this is a great example of the soft bigotry of low expectations that liberals have for people who are not white. Because what they're essentially, one of the girls, she writes, it's a product of advanced education to be able to condense your word count down. First of all, if you're going to Harvard or you're even thinking of applying to Harvard, you are likely the product of higher and more expensive education. They don't just take your average Joe. I couldn't apply, right? But when you talk about those essays, it actually is beneficial to especially minorities, for instance, because they have the opportunity to showcase themselves even more if they don't have the resources to get a tutor who's going to help them write that 1,000-word essay. And I got to tell you, if I had 5 essays to do my academic achievement, a quick personal statement, rather than looking at a 1,000-word paper and saying, what do I think the admissions officer is going to want? I'm going to choose the 5 categories.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Morgan, this is what they write. The authors argue longer essays more equitably allow applicants to discuss their experiences in full, particularly if they are from non-traditional backgrounds and require more space to elaborate on nuanced qualifications. They argue that trauma dumping is acceptable, describing it as explaining how past life experiences have shaped who you are. Those who have undergone traumatic experiences should not have to fear that writing about the experiences that shaped them looks like a beg for admissions, they state. This is just, can we just stop? Again, we need to stop it.
I can't help but laugh.
Yeah,
I can't help but laugh
dumb.
at this. How is this real? And it's funny that it's Harvard, because a couple of weeks ago it came out that Harvard is the one school that has the least amount of free speech on their entire campus. So of course the wokeness is coming out of Harvard University, considered one of the most prestigious universities in our country. And like Brianna said, if you're going to Harvard, you should be able to collect your thoughts into a 200-word little prompt. And why would you want to write an 1,000 or 2,000-word essay to begin with to explain your trauma? A college admissions counselor doesn't doesn't want to hear your trauma. They want to hear your accolades and why you deserve to go to that university. If I could go back 6 years and when I was applying to college and just write a 200-word essay like that, done. I would much rather do that than sit down. I had tutoring. I was very fortunate enough to have a college counselor. But this is quite the opposite of being equitable. This isn't equitable at all. I think this actually works more in minorities' favor than not.
Give me a haiku. You know what I mean? Like, we can just condense it right down.
Shorten it down.
Yeah, I would have been happy. I would have been, God, I remember stressing out so much about making sure things were the word length, because if you went too short, then you're like, they're going to think I can't do it. Come on. I think it's enough of that. But I digress, because we have a lot of issues going on in this country. This is just one of the dumber things I've ever heard. Brianna and Morgan, I want to say thank you both for joining us here on The Right View. Ladies Tea, great to have both of you. To everybody at home, as always, make sure you like, subscribe, share, and follow. And we'll see you back here next time for more of The Right View. So I'm like a lot of people. I love to wear an Apple Watch, but I hate how it looks. And I scoured the internet to search for the best looking Apple Watch cases I could find, and I found it. goldandcherry.com. They have absolutely beautiful watches, as you can see here. Everything is waterproof. Everything looks good with different outfits. You can get sporty, you can get fancy, but they are great quality, made out of Delaware in the United States of America. And they have been kind enough to give me a promo code that I can share with you if you want to get your hands on one of these as well. It's Lara T, L-A-R-A-T is the promo code to get yourself a discount at goldandcherry.com. And not only do they make Apple Watch cases, they also make great products for iPads and iPhones, keyboards, your desktop, everything you could possibly need. Goldandcherry.com. Use promo code LARAT so you can get yourself one of these today too. At The Right View, we're very proud of the fact that we are independent. We get to say everything that we think and everything that we feel. We have no woke companies guiding us or telling us what we can and cannot say. We are always going to shoot you straight and give you the facts as we know them. And that's why it's important to support independent outlets like The Right View. My name is Lara Trump, and I think Mike Lindell is a patriot. He is someone who loves this country, is willing to fight for this country. I love MyPillow because not only are MyPillows made in the USA by American workers, but they're great products, and they're so great that not only do I use them in my own bed at night, my children actually requested. My daughter the other day went to the closet and pulled out a MyPillow and said, "This is the pillow that I want to sleep with." And I gotta tell you, she loves it and will have nothing to do with any other pillow. So it's a big hit around our house. My dogs also happen to sleep on MyPillow dog beds. So all around the Trump household, we're big fans. If you go to mypillow.com today and use promo code Trump, again, promo code Trump, you will not only save money, but you will help us continue this show and other shows like it and help us continue the fight for the future of America. Inflation has impacted all of our lives. I don't think anyone can go to the gas pump or the grocery store without noticing that it is a major factor. And unfortunately, it's not going anywhere. It doesn't seem like it's going down in the way that we would like it to. And one way to protect your money is by investing in precious metals, gold and silver. That's always been a great way to make sure that you keep your money and you keep it safe. When you go to bh-pm.com, use promo code Trump. That way, if you decide you want to invest in gold and silver, you'll save yourself a little bit of money. We live in a time that's very interesting. A lot of us out there feel like a lot of our rights are slipping away. And if you're like I am and you want to have the right to choose whether or not to have a vaccine, how to live your life freely, and you're looking for a great doctor, I've heard amazing things about Dr. Sherwood. He's somebody who you should really check out and check into, and it'll help support this program and keep us going. So go to sherwood.tv TV and use promo code Trump. Again, Sherwood.tv and use promo code Trump. You can save yourself some money and help us keep our program going.